says, "How dare you? You reject a product that I got to float. I took something that you created to sink to the bottom of the sea, and I got it to float. Therefore, I deserve the magnificent throne. I deserve the magnificent crown. And I deserve your magnificence tenfold." And God said, "Whoa, let's back up a minute here. Let's get one thing straight.
Wouldn't it be great if you had a friend to help you out?
I don't mind it. It's actually good exercise. It usually rings one last. There it is. Usually rings one last time. It's almost like being a choir director, you know?
Yeah.
Woo!
Nice work, man. Praise the Lord.
Welcome to the Rich Dawn, where eternal beatitude begins in this life. I'm Kyle Dean, and today I have returning Patrick Wisinski from episode 8. And Pat, we just saw a clip of you ringing some bells in the church tower, and we're going to talk a little bit more today, a continuation of what we talked about last time, which is mentorship. So first of all, how are you? And then give us some context on the bell ringing.
Well, doing great, Kyle. Thank you for having me again. Basically, the bell ringing came up back in 2015. Like I had mentioned back in the last episode, how I had gone to a particular parish starting in 2013 and then totally came back to the faith in 2016. I was introduced to the idea of ringing bells in the bell tower at Corpus Christi Church here in Buffalo, New York. And the whole thought process behind that was somebody had started a club. Basically, it's kind of like somebody sponsors it, somebody makes certificates. Basically, I just want to show that.
Yeah, let's see it.
Basically, here's my very first certificate for ringing the bells. He goes into detail about climbed the 77 steps and rang the rang the St. Francis bell, I want to say it was. So the number one bell there is St. Hyacinth. The second bell is St. Anthony, the one that was in my right hand on the in the video. And the big bell, St. Francis, which basically is in the back of myself there. And
if I remember right, that's St. Anthony of Padua and St. Francis of Assisi, right?
Yes. And so... And Hyacinth, that's a 600-pound bell. The St. Anthony bell is 1,000 pounds, and St. Francis is 2,000 pounds, exactly 1 ton. So
proper
you
ton.
really gotta, So in proper tone, you name it. So for anybody who might be interested in ringing bells at Corpus Christi after a Sunday Mass, I mean, feel free to come see me and what have you, and we'll see what we can do. If you'd like a certificate, that's what we got to offer over there. So
awesome. Yeah, and I remember back when we first met, you graciously invited me, and I got my certificate doing that. I'd actually come from bell ringing at another parish for a number of years, and in downtown Buffalo, which is I had always meditated on the idea of really just bringing the spiritual warfare in the best way possible to the city, because we know, of course, those actual bells, when they are consecrated, they're exorcismic in quality. They exorcistic. They bring the demons of the air to flee, which is just amazing. I mean, this is such an important post in the life of the church. I think it's been historically connected to, similarly to the porter's role, right? You have 7 levels in the church. You have the porter, the lector, exorcist, acolyte, subdeacon, deacon, and priest, which we had the earliest recorded documentation the church has of this goes back to, I think, the 1, if not 200s, well before Christianity was even legalized. And then it's been around until 1972 when Paul VI suppressed that. But these are such important roles. The porter is basically like the bouncer. Think of the times when, you had the pagans wanting to break into the church and you needed someone to shore up the entrance to protect the Eucharist. So too, we need to ring these bells to drive out the demons of the air.
And it just sounds so beautiful up there while you're doing it. It's like you ring them for a good 5 minutes too, and every minute is well worth it. Every second, it's just there's something about it. It's like once you're done, it's like you had an amazing workout or something. So.
Physical, spiritual, and a lot of more modern churches or just old churches where they did some renovating, they swap out those bells for the electronic machine, which unfortunately, just due to physics and simple theology, those do not have the exorcistic qualities. So it's a true blessing, if you're able to find a church like Corpus Christi that has functional, these bells still. Now, of course, we know there's a few bell repairmen in our diocese that are still savvy to the craft, which is such an important aspect of this work that we partake in with the Divine Liturgy. So.
And I made an attempt to go up into that bell tower. I don't know if I can do it so much now, but we'll have to maybe try again. But I know Marty was on one of your episodes, and he's one of the servicemen who service those bells. Or actually, he is the one, I should say. And, hopefully.
He's an incredibly talented man.
Yeah.
As are you, man. You were manning all 3 single-handedly. Like,
hey, it takes practice. It takes practice.
It's awesome.
Yes, it takes lots of practice.
Absolutely. So. You got to get the rhythm. You got to have the strength.
Oh, yes.
Talk about the virtue of perseverance, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Fortitude.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So as I recall, the last time we got on, we really got deep into, the aspect of mentorship. Another thing that we have a huge update on is, we were that episode was kind of like talking about how you were going to be aging out of young adult ministry soon. That has since been consummated. Huge life change for all of us, you most especially, but all of us, right? Who appreciate so much all of your contributions, and of course you're still involved in different ways, but maybe we could talk a little bit about that, and then just kind of this update about where your heart's at about what it is to be a good mentor and the importance of that role.
Sure. So basically I what I'd like to touch on in this episode is just basically rediscovering our roots. During my journey, I had found something rather very interesting just by, just kind of being out in the country or whatever, just kind of figuring out like, my goodness, there's something about this, like something that's just in my blood, like in my DNA or something that I was able to recognize, something that might have dated way back when to ancestral times. I mean, my my ancestors do come from Poland. You got my last name there, Wisinski, which is actually pronounced Polish Wisinski, which I had come to find out it means like, basically I'm Patrick, son of a cherry farmer from the cherry orchard, kind of like how they describe Jesus of Nazareth, and that's exactly what W-I-S, Wish is cherries in Polish, and it's like, okay, come to find out I'm a cherry picker from the cherry orchards, my family and what have you. Not only that, I mean, I know my father had touched on a lot of topics about, how the land was invaded back, by Prussia and Russia and everything. Like, they were always oppressed because they were never, unfortunately, back in history, they were never able to actually be united. They were never actually able to stick together, and the reason for that was a lot of their neighbors were envious. So envy, one of the 7 deadly sins, and it's like, pride, also rooted in pride. I mean, if you have one of them, it's all kind of linked together.
Absolutely. And Ecclesiasticus 10:15, as we've taught many in our ministry.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because touching on that, it's just kind of interesting because I recall going out in the woods, and a neighbor had said he saw that I was just one of these kind of lumberjackers, like I had mentioned in the previous episode. Just had this hobby of we'll get to that too, another keyword, hobby, that I have this hobby of lumberjacking, and I just so happened to find cherry wood in a pile, and it was almost. And of course, I mean, it isn't exactly the hardest thing in the world to find, but just my senses started to kick in when I spotted it, because it was just all very, blood red in the core and everything. And I'm just thinking to myself, my senses were kind of kicking in, and I go, that's got to be cherry wood. But to get a good verification, I had brought my father over and had said, hey, is this cherry wood? He says, oh, yes. Yeah, that is. And it's like, wow. Cool. And just kind of rediscovering, that's kind of the way I rediscovered my roots a little bit. Then I come to find out, here I am, I'm chopping all this wood up and I'm smoking with it and stuff like that, smoking some pretty good, making some pretty good meals out of it and what have you. And
I would say that's another one of your hidden talents. I don't know whether you want to get into that at length, but man, you can smoke some good meats, man, and fish, and
Yeah, it's again, it's just a general hobby that I have. Speaking of which, it was kind of with the trade I had pursued for my career. Basically, it was like I found myself actually making a fire pit, and doing a bunch of different knickknacks. And by the way, speaking of welding and steel and everything like that, you had my side of the story, whereas like I'm the guy from the cherry farm, collecting cherry wood, whatever. And as a matter of fact, I recall Kowalski, meaning blacksmith from the land of Poland. The Kowalskis were the ones who did all the blacksmithing. But it's almost like, imagine them being my neighbor, and imagine me being envious over them being able to make, pots and what have you, versus it's like, which it is something that I do tend to struggle with from time to time. Envy, absolutely. I mean, and some of the things that sometimes I'll look around and just say, why can't I have what this person has? And it's just kind of like, it's a wrong way of thinking, I know, but it's just kind of what's the word? You don't tend to look at the gifts that you yourself do have versus what somebody else has or might not have or what have you.
Yes. And it's so funny that you're bringing this up, because I have been, as a soul searcher myself, I'm highly cognizant in the spiritual warfare realm that, we all struggle with at least one deadly sin throughout our life. And I'm not saying that's what it is for you, because, this is just one of 7, right? And anyone could struggle with one or more. Things can come in and out of seasons, but one of them at least tends to be kind of, more or less a root for us subjectively, even though objectively we know that pride is the root of them all. But I've found myself studying envy more lately, because I say this in all humility, it's one that I haven't understood too much throughout my life. Right. And maybe that's just because I have a lot to be thankful for, but and also I think we should clearly define our terms, right? Theologically, envy, not to be confused with jealousy, is, desiring somebody else's good to their loss of it, right? Now, it's not the same thing. You could just like what someone else has and want to also shoot for it. You want to avoid vainglory or any other of the sins that could be associated, or vices that could be associated with that. But, envy is like desiring something to someone else's loss of it, as opposed to jealousy, right? God is jealous, it says in the Bible. That's, classically not even a vice, as long as it's moderated, right? Jealousy just means you want to guard a good that you have. That is a rightful good of yours. But maybe you can help me to better understand this as we're having this providential conversation, because, it's I think there's something to getting to the root, if you will, of envy, because other than pride, which we know is turning away from God to self, which is how you can connect it to all of the deadly sins, I think envy, it's the most spiritual sin, other than the very root itself, that you can kind of specifically point to and try to, recognize it for what it is, so that we can, root it out and whatever else. But I also like how you just brought in the connection to history when going back to look for someone's roots, how sometimes these sins tend to follow a specific type of people, like whether it's, the land that you're from, or whether it's hereditary or whatever, whether that's nature, nurture, picked up by family. There's just so many components that go into it. And as I'm hearing your version of the tale, it's something that people dating back centuries might have struggled with, and in some way it carries on over the ages, and we might not even be aware of it.
It's pretty incredible that you mentioned that too. You mentioned something about the manual bells versus electronics these days, and that it doesn't take the demons out of the air as much.
Right,
they're not as efficient, if you will. They're not as doesn't have that. It's almost like natural versus artificial kind of thing. What's as a matter of fact, I was kind of given this. I kind of came up with an analogy, spirit driven. Through all my challenges and everything else, and life experiences and whatnot, I had come to the conclusion that that's kind of like, I think about the war in heaven, like, dating all the way back to, dating back to God and Lucifer versus, the war in heaven. Like, what was that all about? And it's like, man, you know what? It was just, it was a pride thing. It was an envy thing. Right. God, I remember you specifically saying too that God is just simple. He's he's got this simpleness to him, and what have you. And also, I almost left out that you had also mentioned that that I am like the older brother that you never had.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. It come to basically. I'm also an older brother biologically. Like I got, and I always, after I started reading scripture and everything, coming back to church and getting into the scripture and everything, I had recognized that, when it comes to two brothers, basically, it seems like the older one has the curse, the younger one has the blessing, right? You got Cain and Abel. and you got Esau and Jacob, Ishmael and Isaac, and that sort of thing, you know. And we all know what happens from there on out. Like Esau sold his birthright because of his short-sightedness. I want to thank a friend for the recollection on that. It was Dan May's father who had said that, and it's like, whoa, short-sightedness, yes, short-sighted, you know, check mark, which is kind of what I've been, you know, when it comes to mistakes in life, sure, you know. And
what does short-sighted mean to you?
What is short-sightedness? Just taking the easy out, you know. He was Esau was you know, perished. He was hungry, and he was just like, I need this bowl of soup that bad. Basically, I'm willing to sell my inheritance. Basically, it's like, you know, in the end, you kind of go, oh my goodness, that was stupid, right? But any one of us can make that sort of mistake. I mean, I know I have in some ways, shape, or form. And, you know, and even in the book of Genesis, it describes, you know, Cain, he was jealous of Abel because God accepted Abel's offer and he rejected Cain's offer. Now, and Cain was upset, you know, and God said it like in the word, you have the power to overcome your temptation of sin, you know. Like right away, Cain was thinking, I'm gonna kill my brother. I'm, you know, super jealous or envious, you know, there it is. And lo and behold, what happened? But God was hinting to him that you have the power. You have the power to overcome this rage, this, you know, this temptation to do bad things, so to speak, which relating back to God and being simple and everything. I remember reading a reflection about the flood in Noah, and basically this reflection had stated that you know, God gave Noah all the instructions to build the ark, all these instructions, and built it with wood, right? And it had also said that even shipbuilding today is used, when they build ships today, it's used with the exact same dimensions as referred to as in the Bible. And it's just, of course, it's all translated, but basically you look at a ship on the water, and it's all the same. Every dimension is the exact same from how God had described to Noah how to build it, all the way back then for the flood. And I found it fascinating because I had worked at a port before. As a matter of fact, I still do part-time, but and those ships, those vessels, I'll tell you what, they're pretty massive and pretty interesting. Like I remember driving by one time, and my father even mentioned something. He goes, you know something? I don't know how in the world they did it, but how in the world did they get such a massive piece of steel to float on water, you know? So, and that brings me to a bit of my analogy. It's like, there was God, and then there was Lucifer. And Lucifer was a reflection of the glory of God, right? And he made him big and beautiful, pretty much identical to he himself, God. He was his first son, you know? And it's like, here's that first son again, you know? We all know what happens next, but also at the same time, it's, as I put everything together to form this analogy, I realized that, you know, God built a vessel, right? Made it out of wood. And it's like, what's so simple, you know, think about that, how simple and easy. I mean, wood floats on water. That's the way he created it to be. Wood floats on water. He built this massive thing. And, you know, we all are in the same boat. There's all those sayings. We're all in the same boat. Keywords, scale from 1 to 10 or batting 1,000. I've heard that too many times, you know, like basically if I'm trying too hard, I know I've heard people say, come on, Pat, you're batting 1,000, knock it off or whatever. And so So anyway, God had built the vessel made from wood, and it's my analogy that when we saw a Ripperger video once with Chris Stefanik, I think, and it was discussing the topics of how basically Lucifer was going to be replaced. You know, it was Blessed Mother, I want to say, yes, and basically it was like, okay, she's given more talents than he had one specific thing to do, one job, and Father Ripperger, as he describes, he couldn't even do that, unfortunately. It almost reminds me of the parables, the parable of the talents. One person had 10 talents, they went out and made 10 more. Another person had 5 talents, they went out and made another 5, and the one with 1 talent buried his talent, right? And it's like, oh, there it is. That's exactly what Lucifer did, unfortunately, but on the contrast, what he did in desperation to be number one in the eyes of God, he wanted to, this is what I believe, if you want to call me out on it, what have you, it's, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, it is what it is, but it's my belief that he built the steel ship. He went about, like, it was like one of those things where it's like, I gotta do something. I gotta be number one. I gotta, first come, first serve. We all have this mentality, right? First come, first serve. You go stand in the line. If you're first, you get it. What you're waiting in line for first. And it's like, so he did this whole great big thing to upgrade. It's like, here we go with the natural versus artificial, or manual bells versus electronic bells. And he built this great big massive ship out of steel. And here we are, we're thinking, yeah, wood floats on water, even though how much you try to submerge it in the water, it rises right back up to the surface, versus if you threw a piece of steel in the water, it sinks right to the bottom, and whatnot. So, and same thing happened. It was like, he says, I'm gonna offer this up to God. I know he's gonna accept it because this is just absolutely brilliant. God's a simple kind of brilliant. I like to say Lucifer was too brilliant. The intellect, and too much intellect, not enough will, right? And bear with me because it's about to come up, the reenactment, but things might get a little intense here for audience purposes, but basically, when God did not accept his offer, like he did to Cain, because the offer, I kind of see what could have been behind it. The offers offered up was related to 7 deadly sins, basically pride, greed per se, something. I can make a. Of course, we don't know how it is in the angelic realm, but I can make a good buck off of this, yada, 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 and so on and so forth. The next thing, it just keeps on going and going into something catastrophic. Well, God rejected his offer. And he says, ruffled his feathers a bit and says, how dare you? You reject a product that I got to float. I took something that you created to sink to the bottom of the sea, and I got it to float. Therefore, I deserve the magnificent throne. I deserve the magnificent crown. And I deserve your magnificence tenfold. And God said, whoa, let's back up a minute here. Let's get one thing straight. You deserve nothing. Your intellect is magnificent, yet mistaken. That fiery temperament, magnificent, yet mistaken. You ought to take those things and channel them, focus in, and do towards what is magnificent. However, he didn't want to listen. He did what he did. Whatever. Just kind of threw it on out. He just said, I'm going to go be captain for my ship. I'm going to go be captain, my ship, mine. And so what's the next thing he did? Apparently he's a brilliant inventor, correct? It's like, so he's taken the things that God created and he's upgrading things, Next thing he does.
Or maybe one-upsmanship, right?
Mm-hmm. One-upsmanship. I mean, we see it today with why do it manually when you can do it automatic, right?
Sure.
And
Industrial Revolution was a huge turning point with that.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you see it all over the place. I mean, we are his replacement. Unfortunately, too many of us follow the same path. It's up to us to, and without God, then that's basically it. For you follow down the same path as Lucifer, unfortunately. And so, which comes to my next thing. So he's this big ball of fire, right? I mean, he is the star of light, and so he looks in the water, let's say, on his ship. And you know how when you go up to a pond or something or a lake and you dip your feet in the water and you see the reflection of the sun in the water, it's just very peaceful. It's very, you're not getting burned by it or nothing. But which led to his next upgrade, so to speak. That was his idea of inventing the mirror. And it's kind of like, we don't really think about mirrors and reflections and everything, but what did he do to make steel? Is like, in order to make steel, you got to have carbon and fire, like at so hot, basically wood and fire, and get iron at a blazing temperature in order to get steel, right?
Right.
Of course, God put that there. What happened? Lucifer upgraded it. So, using the same fire and some sand, heated it all up and made glass. Somehow was able to make a mirror, what have you, and saw himself in the mirror, and that's when a lot of his pride began. You think about it sometimes, and it's like, you hold your right hand up in a mirror, and in the reflection, the left hand goes up, right? So in his journey, he's thinking, right, God's about 100 and Lucifer's like this perfect 10. I'm just going to use a $10 bill for the heck of it. But so here's Lucifer, this perfect 10, looking in the mirror, and he thought he could multiply himself with God, which is a perfect 100 as well, get him to equal 1,000. Here's where he's batting 1,000. He goes and he looks in the mirror, and wouldn't you know, it's like there's that pesky serpent. That's how Satan had been created. He came about and said, did God really turn down your 1,000? I'm offering you 1,001. Not knowing enough, and I'm going to use this for an example. I mean, look at the cover of this book, for example. You see a beautiful mountain region, the sky in the background and everything, and then you got the water and all that. Now, what I want you to do, what I would like you to do, now I'm presenting this to you.
Okay.
Act like you're presenting it to me. Just kind of flip it around and show me the cover. Now tell me if what you're looking at isn't the exact same or almost doesn't, you know what I mean about perspective sometimes?
I'm seeing a natural reflection as opposed to...
Mm-hmm. Right, but also he also didn't notice that the one in the mirror was backwards. Sometimes there's a distinct something very interesting about reflection, which is something that caught my attention with the cover of this book too and everything. And then of course you have star of light on water, which is a natural reflection, versus star of light in the mirror, which equals hellfire. A thank you to a friend for that analogy, for that, and basically, yeah, what happens when you hold a mirror up to the sun? You burn a hole and stuff. It's like, whoa, this is incredible. So then again, it's like Lucifer in the mirror holding up his right hand. The left hook came out and hooked him on his pride. Meet the real Captain Hook.
Yeah.
And that's just how that's just how the evil one is. It's like, he has such a way of getting you hooked on certain sins and what have you. But, thankfully coming to your ministry and everything, I've been a lot more enlightened than I had been in the past. And also along with doing all those exoduses and whatnot. Basically, where all that anger, like, I don't want to say anger, but yeah, a lot of it stems from, I can actually recall, basically, I remember being 12 years old and having to do a science project for school or whatnot. And I remember the previous year they handed out ribbons for rewards or whatever. And basically the lowest reward was a silver ribbon or something. A red ribbon was the ultimate reward. A blue ribbon was second best and what have you.
Okay.
So the following year, I thought I came up with a brilliant idea, and I'll share it with you and everyone. It's basically it was a project on like why or how does salt melt ice, and it's kind of like probably Ralphie in A Christmas Story, that classic movie, The Christmas Story that you watch every Christmas, the marathon. If you miss it, I guess that's your fault. But but basically, here he's fantasizing. He's having all these fantasies about, giving him an A plus across the board and whatnot, and then he ends up getting a C plus, and how disappointed he was. Well, the very same thing did happen to me. Here I was, I had this project that I thought, I'm gonna do so good on it. And it's like if it's kind of like what I've learned all the way up until now. It's like, man, if you're expecting something, you expect nothing almost, So, anyway, fast forward a good 20 odd years, and here I am, like said, coming back to the faith in 2016. By 2017, I was running a big rig for work, and part of what I do. I mean, I'm not going to get into my career for time purposes and whatnot, but basically, I when it snows, I plow and salt the roads, and it's like kind of one of the things about reward. About some of the things that falls in line with failing like you do when you think you have a brilliant idea leads to it's all in God's perfect timing, maybe to just humble us too, and then he'll give us a reward. Maybe he'll reward us with something. And now, thinking back to when I had failed and thinking about how upset I was, I put all this time and effort into it, as like I did in my little demonstration there, as Lucifer put into making a steel ship, I guess you can say, versus being prideful and holding up the right hand and getting hooked and everything. Come to humility and find out here's what he did. Here's me way back when doing a science project on how salt melts ice, and here I am today driving a big rig, clearing salt out of the road, or clearing snow out of the road, and spreading salt.
No, we didn't. They didn't do it again. What?
To melt the ice, and it's like, whoa, this is pretty, wow,
Full circle.
Wow, it's pretty incredible. And I mean, and basically, so see, it's like what happened. The biggest angel fell and everything. Where that lead? That led to all sorts of problems. Basically, it's like you often wonder sometimes what would have happened if it had gone the other way around. It's like, so that's why I feel called to be like a mentor to the younger men and what have you, just to be a real true big brother, something that Lucifer wasn't able to do, unfortunately. I mean, right now he's he took a third of heaven with him, who has false respect for him, realistically, and versus
Nailed it.
yeah, versus he could have probably what would the alternative been? Sometimes I think of what could the outcome been had it been the other way around. Well, he probably would have been in charge of a third of heaven, with brothers looking up to him with true respect.
Wow.
So
Could be. Let me hop in for a moment.
Sure,
here, 'cause,
sure.
I mean, that was a lot of wisdom to drop, and I have so many different angles I could go with it, but I wanna kick it right back to you. So before I do, you opened the door. You said I'm allowed to pick anything apart. Really, Pat, the only thing that the theologian in me wants to throw in there into the mix, for the sake of souls and truth, is, you mentioned Lucifer as God's, first son. The angels, since they're immaterial, they're not sons of God. That's one of the things that's a distinct excellence that humanity gets to have. And it's one of the reasons that the incarnation is such a profound mystery. So other than just that one word choice, and of course you said it's an analogy. All analogies fall apart at some point, right? But, that's by design. In fact, it can even be a feature of how you use the analogy. So, and obviously you did that throughout, right? Like you're providing a story, and, maybe with some, if you want to say like creative fiction, but to make a nonfiction point, which is recognizing the danger of these vices, recognizing how to overcome, noticing the patterns and how not to fall, right? You've got the theme of being the bigger brother, but not wanting to be like Cain or Esau, and what does it mean to be an authentic big brother, right? You also kind of mentioned how, again, this is part of the analogy, but, picture this idea where Lucifer is the one-upping God by creating a steel version of the boat. Funny enough, as someone who's studied somewhat, the first book of Enoch, there's 3 books of Enoch, there is something in there, which of course is not considered canon by the Catholic Church, although it's not ruled out as historically, relevant in some way, shape, or form, of course. That's why it's in the Apocrypha. The Ethiopian Coptic Church actually accepts it in their canon, interestingly. But it mentions in there about how the demons basically taught mankind specific crafts that we would not otherwise know, like even like makeup and certainly artillery and warfare. That's where my mind immediately went when you said that. Like, so who are we to know for sure to what extent, the fiction and the nonfiction, wrestle with each other, and you're left with the raw truth. But again, for the purposes of the analogy, the point stands, right? It's that with Lucifer's fall, there is this, this envy that's rooted in the pride. There's this one-upsmanship. There's this false respect, right? And of course, as for us in humanity, we have human respect. It drives me nuts, actually. It's when I try to understand envy, I also I've tried to help people realize over the years, it's like, why would you, God is no respecter of persons, any person. And we're called to be like God in all ways. So why would you give deference to any human being when we all, it's like they say about our opinions. We all got them. They all stink. We're all stinky. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing to, and like you said, God doesn't owe us anything. And that's true humility. It's recognizing where we are in the hierarchy, if you will. And we are forever created. Now, that being said, we can't know for sure exactly what goes on in the spiritual realm and how they would translate greed. I mean, we know a lot about it. Obviously, they're trying to steal souls. They're trying to, basically, they hate that they're even created. They want to be annihilated. It would actually be better for them to be annihilated than to persist eternally suffering, right? This is why we see what Jesus says about Judas. It would have been better for him not to even be born. And they want to make the rest of us like that. The best they can do is to drag us down into hell with that hook. And, so they're I guess they're what's the word I'm looking for? In a monetary world, their currency is souls.
Ah, yes.
You know what I mean? And that's how they're greedy in that regard. But they're really truly envious. And last thing I'll say, and then I have a question for you. is, we have one of our brothers, our fellow brothers in our ministry, Dynamis, of course, whenever you mention it by name this time around, for those who might be tuning into this one and not the previous episode we did. We had a brother that went on to become a monk, a religious, and in one of his, letters, he pointed out to us how they were given this profound lecture on how you can kind of couple the sins. In some ancient versions, there's the 8 deadly sins. And the point is that you can pair the sins in the way that they're very related to each other. And you go all the way from the bottom with carnal sins. And I admittedly can't recall specifically which ones were which. But either way, at the top of the food chain, going from the carnal deadly sins up to the spiritual deadly sins, envy and pride are coupled together. And so they're very, very similar in terms of the damage they cause. And I think it's so important to target envy because it's much easier to distinguish it versus you look at pride and it's like, well, it's all of them. But it's like, no, envy is this specific beast that we need to conquer. And now I kick it back to you. So what do you think it takes? You acknowledge that God even told Cain, you have everything that you need in order to, persevere through your wrath, envy, and whatever else it is. What do you think it takes to be that solid mentor, to conquer our lower vices and to truly reflect Christ in that manner?
I think just tackle it right from the root. It's kind of, between praying, like praying rosary, praying Divine Mercy Chaplet, the office hours,
fasting,
and also, fasting. And also, what I do find, one other thing I might mention is that, maybe like that, maybe this is the one talent that I have. The whole, when it dates back to just going back to your roots. Like maybe I know when I'm actually out there doing my hobby, which it's interesting because we call our hobbies and our careers our careers. I find it funny about how, saying that too many of us fall down the path of Lucifer, basically. And I think in general what may have happened, because again, he was assigned to do one thing, but he was doing all these other things, supposedly, he did not do his one career, if you would call it, but was doing all these hobbies. And who's to say that I'm not doing a hobby as my career and my hobby is my career, basically? Who's to say that there isn't some truth to that? Because I find myself, going back out to the country and just doing some of the little knick-knack things. And I even say to myself, I'm cutting wood, splitting wood, cooking over an open fire and what have you. And I find myself saying, I could do this every day of my life and not have the, what they say about doing a job that you love. You never work a day in your life. It's like, somebody else would look at me and just say, you're working too hard today. Why don't you cut it out? It's a nice sunny day. And it's like, this is what I like doing. Yes. I'm having fun doing this,
I relate to what you're saying 100%, man.
Oh, yeah.
In my life, I've reflected on how, I was a Zen journalist for almost 2 decades. And emphasis on Zen, right? I was actually practicing Buddhist for some years. You know my story. I don't know that I've gotten into that publicly too much. Maybe I'll dedicate an episode to it sometime. But I was very, very deep in the Mahayana Soto Zen school. But I also knew a lot about the Rinzai and this and that and whatever else, Theravada Buddhism and the chain of causation that came with that before my conversion. And part of being Zen is, being that monk that has the patience and the tenacity to put together a magnificent work of art with little beads of sand, grain by grain, and then to allow for the wind to come and take it away. And you don't get bent out of shape about it. You don't worry about credit. You know what I mean? And you just move on. And it's a reflection on, you know, the fleetingness of this life, detachment, right? And then when I converted to a more traditionalist understanding of journalism, I realized, wow, I'm going to be reviled by those who can't comprehend the utter credibility of what I'm saying. You know, if that makes sense. I guess I'll just leave it at that for now.
Yeah. Wow.
So some people might, you know, think of something as a hobby. Someone might think of something as a career. And at the end of the day, you know, you either take risks or you're going to work for someone who does.
Sure. And it leads me on another thing as to, you know, a lot of people are miserable with what they do for a living. I mean, you know, sometimes I myself tend to be at times, you know, some days are better than others, but it's like, you know, basically there's this whole great big other thing that just we have lost focus of, you know, coming into, speaking of upgrading and stuff like that. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, I found some of these old mirrors and it's like, you know, what does that remind you of? It's like I got this little bit bigger one. I mean, I don't know about you, but this kind of reminds me of like an iPad or something. And
I was
this
thinking
reminds
like
me of
boxing practice
or something.
but they wouldn't last too long.
Yeah, but that's the purpose for that. But basically, you know, I mean, we also live in a society, upgrade to this, upgrade to that, you know. I mean, we're, you know, all of a sudden you find out people aren't happy with what they have. It's like they got to have, you know, we got this desire to want the next best, greatest thing. And it's just like, what's the purpose of it? It's like, it's almost like this world is a reflection of what probably basically what would happen if he would have got his way, you know. And it's just kind of like, my goodness, it really is an eye opener.
Yes.
Versus, you know, I mean, he created this earth to be just like heaven, a second heaven, as we would say, you know. And
you know, I remember the day that it really hit me. Actually, I think it was as a result of a conversation you and I had. You were really focusing on how, you know, there have been mystics that transcend the universe and they go through water, right, before they pierce the other side. And it's kind of, maybe, I don't know if you recall telling me that, but it's you connected it to the firmament, right? There's this firmament holding, you know, our universe together. In fact, I remember in studying theology, the professor would talk about the unique moment. Basically, the flood happened, and that's when the firmament was weakened once and for all from then on, in terms of the temporally in time and space. And then there was one other big moment, and that was when Jesus was baptized and the heavens were opened. For a brief moment, the firmament got impacted again there. But I reflect with like tremendous sadness that everything we're looking at, and we think it's so beautiful. You look at this, you know, this nature, and even though of course it is beautiful, and God made everything that it was good, you know, we understand that it was even more beautiful before the firmament was damaged. Right?
Wow.
The more and more and more as time goes on, we're post-fall, we degrade, we deteriorate, right? You think of the age span of the earlier men and now what we have now. We're just trying to let, you know, post-industrial revolution with this artifices, now we got the artificial intelligence, trying to pump it, you know? But nothing beats the real thing.
And you know, don't get me wrong, because it's like, you know, God had put all these things here to build up the kingdom.
Right.
It was all for the intensive purposes. Yeah, you know, it's like Lucifer may have figured that out of how to quote unquote upgrade, but we got to be careful with our upgrades. I mean, it can always be used as a significant tool and what have you, but just don't abuse it. Kind of like,
And
you
just
know,
like melancholy, right?
Uh-huh.
Like anything else, it's a tool in the arsenal. Well, it's a temperament, but the effects of it and the way that it impacts your habits and your virtues, it needs to be tempered just like all the rest. So yeah, it's sad, but you don't mope, right? You just you keep pushing forward. And of course, our ultimate hope is eternal beatitude. I try to help people bring it into this life by comprehending, as you very well know, the 9 levels of prayer and what it takes, the mechanics to get to that 9th level. Because as the Second Vatican Council said, the universal call to holiness, that's precisely what it's referring to. A lot of people don't realize. That was settling a centuries-old debate of clericalism that only clergy were allowed to reach levels 5 through 9 of prayer. Nope, it's for all of us. And by the way, when Jesus said, be ye perfect, we're supposed to do it. Not for justice's sake, though. For the sake of charity. It's that much more important, and it's that much more of a gift to do that. But when we make ultimate eternal beatitude in heaven, we're going to not worry so much about what all this beauty looked like post-firmament damage, right? It'll be restored.
And another interesting point I want to make out is that when you do see something like down near EPA, they got the first Niagara docked at the bay, and I mean that ship is made out of wood, and it's just nothing more unique than, because it is. It's like that version of vessels is completely obsolete these days.
Maybe nothing more authentic, right?
But nothing more authentic. I mean, you walk right up to the thing, and it's like, whoa. The big steel ship might also be like, whoa, but there's nothing like actually seeing a wood ship with the, with the sails and everything else. And it's just like, whoa, how did they do it?
Right.
How did he do it?
And even the original ark, right, that Noah built, one of my theology professors pointed this out. I thought it was hilarious that, you get all these cute kids' toys and versions of it for them to play with all the animals and whatever, or you even just get adults reflecting on what the original ark might have looked like. But as you pointed out, I mean, God laid it out in the Bible. That thing didn't have propellers. They didn't need propellers. It was designed to keep everyone alive and afloat through the storm. It wasn't going anywhere. The storm was going to bring it places anyway, right? And yet we put propellers on it. We put all these twists and spins on it, but that's one thing that's just so incredible about the richness of theology, that you can logically break down theos, God, if you put in the effort. And it's while there is so much more that we don't know and may never know in this life, we can still try, right? You think of the realm of the angels, the aeviternity, right? In the avum, they have a beginning but no end. Just like we do too. But because they're not in space, they're immaterial. There's this concept of this aeviternity. It's not a concept, it's a reality. It's the realm in which they exist and also influence this life. It's very strange, and beautiful and terrifying, if you will, depending on what side of the maybe the mirror you're on, right?
Well, and just being in nature in general, it's just a beautiful thing. How often, I do live in the city, but it's like, how oftentimes when I do go out into the country, it's like,
Nothing
okay,
like it.
this is living, this
Yes.
is living. It feels like you breathe so much better, everything, and it's just a matter of trying to teach these young ones similar things. And a lot of them like it. It's thus far. I haven't really, put a big oomph behind it there, but for the little bit of time that we did have together, kind of exploring and being on a retreat and what have you, they seem to really enjoy just being out in nature. So and it's just something that
first time ever revving a chainsaw. You got to learn them at one point.
Yeah. Even though that is more automatic, I must say. It's
right. It's nothing like chopping.
Nothing like chopping, or even grabbing a good old fashioned saw with two guys and one on one end and one on the other to saw a log in half.
That's it.
That's the next best thing here. So
absolutely. Wow.
And actually, one other thing, it's like, if you surrender to God, it's like, how was Jesus up on the cross? It's like surrendering to God, right? Had he would have done just that, maybe God would have rewarded him, tenfold plus 10, Oh.
There it is.
Yeah,
yes. Well, that's what we're all yearning for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully. It reminds me when they say, no one rejects what the church truly is. People tend to reject what they think it is, or they reject what they think God is. Some tyrannous, overlord that just expects a list of, us to not follow a list of don'ts, right? And it's so sad when people have that misunderstanding, and that's why we need, mentors like you to keep it simple, and also, like God is, and also bring it back to the roots. Maybe as a closing thought, I wonder, have you given a ton of thought to, or ever crafted maybe an action plan for how to bring others back to their roots, right? You've learned yours. You mentioned the connection to Cherrywood, and just going, back to just focusing on cherry trees and chopping them down and cooking and eating and really just being in tune with nature. And that's part and parcel of your very last name, right? Your given name. What might that look like for getting to know other mentees that you would have, and helping them point back to their own roots?
Mm-hmm. Or even just picking cherries in general, and working with that neighbor Kowalski to give me a nice little pot to kind of stir it all up and make a good jam, or maybe a good liqueur or something. Creative things. I mean, we all have our call with certain gifts that we do have. Right. And it's like, instead of being jealous or envious of one another, with pride as a connection, to just work together in harmony. And basically, you never know, okay, I could pick all these cherries and give them to my neighbor or whatever, make something for him, and he can vice versa make me a pot of some sort, or make me a very fine quality pot or something,
You know what? I love the answer you just gave. It's, hey, I know what my talent is. And by the way, I think you got more than one, but I recognize the humility in you saying that, and just not trying to force anything beyond that, but working with and through that. And then it goes back to that collaboration instead of competition. Mm-hmm. Right? And yeah. And I thank you for your witness, and for, laying it on the table. Like, yeah, these are vices I've struggled with in my day, and these are the demons I'm slaying, because, I'm sure our viewers and listeners have heard this somewhere, and if you haven't, tune in. Like, when you identify your weaknesses and you can call them out by name, you can truly let them go. It's paradoxical. People think, oh, I have to hide my vulnerabilities, or this or that. And, there's a prudence in this, a time and place and everything else. But if something once truly had a grip on you, a death grip, like one of those deadly sins, and you have identified it, and you've worked and worked and worked to root it out, there is something to be said about saying, death, you have no sting. And then you can be that authentic witness for others who are struggling with similar things, to, take that leap of courage to just let it go. Let the past be the past, and let the all sinners have a past, and let's focus on our future as saints.
Something interesting that happened on my aging out too. Just basically, I felt like I had to, it was like, I felt like I had to be a part of something. It's like, I got to be a part of this. And it's like, there was a certain point, because I'm honoring all the Exodus disciplines. I'm officially done with the Exodus 90, but I did honor the disciplines this year, just as a runoff, because I felt like I had to be a part of something. And it was like, but in that journey, first few days, or roughly a quarter of the way through, I know it was almost like, was almost like I could hear God just telling me, saying, it's okay. It's okay. Just let it go. Let it go. It's okay. You know. And as far as everything else, I know I'm not exactly done here yet. So but I know that we're probably running short on time, and so as we said in the last episode, we'll save all that other stuff for another time.
Praise be to God, man.
Where there's two, there might as well be three.
And there it is. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about your ongoing, journey into what adulthood. It's not an old adulthood. It's not young adulthood.
Middle-aged.
Adulthood.
Right where you need to be, right in the middle.
Exactly.
Right in between.
Virtue lies in the meat, right?
Yeah.
There it is. So.
Hey, the Israelites wandered the desert or the forest for 40 years. So it's kind of a little hint to me too. So
you're out. Well, except you couldn't walk as an infant.
Right.
So maybe you got another year or two to go? Or?
Yeah, however, figuratively speaking, it's like, okay, I've been wandering my personal desert for 40 years. So hey, there you have it.
It is. Yeah. Well, thank you, Brother Pat, again for your witness, for coming back.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you enjoy content like this, we exhort you, please hit that likes, hit that subscribe. We do have intel that we have been getting hit. I mentioned it in the last video, and 2 videos ago, and we've, the account got hacked right after publishing that, and that's actually why we haven't been on the air for some weeks now. But we're back up. And, by God's grace, it will continue that way. And so we really, we could use the support if you feel that this is something that should spread. God's will be done. Former Zen journalist out. God bless you.